Welcome to Council Room 2024. We are now ready for our interview with Lisa Bowerman. Please welcome today's host and interviewer, Chris Hawton.
Hello. Hello. Good evening, Minneapolis or Bloomington. Hello. Right. Oh, that's quite high up. Okay, cool. And joining us is the amazing, the wonderful Lisa Bowerman to speak about all of her wonderful acting and directing. And so I see the TARDIS gently shaking. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Chris.
Take a pew.
We found out we're neighbours, haven't we?
Yes. We live moderately close by.
We do.
Yes.
Yes.
There
we go. And here we are, halfway across the world.
Yes, sitting in mastermind chairs.
I know, it's great.
Yes.
We get a bit of
So,
all the way around.
yeah. So how are you finding Minnesota and the delightful weather?
Not very much, frankly, because we've been inside a lot,
Yes.
as you all have, quite rightly.
Yes.
It's funny, when you come to conventions in cities you've not been, generally it's always slightly outside the city that you are.
Yeah.
So the most exciting thing I found, as you may have heard, since I've been here, is the Container Store. My favourite shop. We don't have one in the UK, but so I've done my Mall of America tour, and I mean, I'm hoping that at some point it'd be nice just to even go through the car, in the car to see. But it's so cold.
Yes.
I wouldn't ask anybody to get out there. I actually find it quite a bit of a novelty, actually.
Same here.
Everybody says you're going to do that thing with the boiling water and the snow and all that sort of
No,
stuff.
no. Do not do that. Do not do that.
Because everybody does that.
Well,
so.
also, it's a good way to go and experience ER.
Really?
Yes.
Right, that sounds like the voice of experience.
It's not the voice of experience, but it's the voice of someone who knows quite a few Canadians who have sort of said, oh, we understand you're going over there. Do not do that. That's a bad thing to do.
Especially if the wind's in the wrong direction, in which case it's stupid.
Because then you have frozen and very hot coming,
Yes.
and you then have to explain it to
Frostbite and boils.
and like, I have travel insurance. I don't really want to test it.
No, that's true.
No.
Okay, but how I find Minnesota,
Yes.
I'm a fan of conventions that are this sort of size, and I'm sure you appreciate the fact that we get much more opportunity to talk to people, and it feels really friendly, and it has been very friendly. I've had some lovely times.
It has been really nice. So the people have just come up and sort of like just been so welcoming and so warm, and yes. But though, speaking of warm, so we're going from one extreme of temperature to another.
I think we may have talked about that in the last hour.
Yes. Sorry, I was.
My first experience of Doctor Who was survival. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it was exceptionally warm.
Yes.
And what I probably didn't say in the last panel was that they had a lot of discussion about the makeup for that. Originally in the scripts, in Rona's scripts, that the cheetah people were meant to be much more human in their form and much more visceral and kind of, and I had all these wonderful images, and I had the makeup test. There was a lot I'd say discussion, it's probably more argument between the makeup department and the props department, because, were the teeth props, were they makeup with a hand, the paws props or makeup with it, and there were so many discussions. The test took 3.5 hours. In fact, they got it down to a fine art in the end, because all that stuff on my face was actually stuck on. Luckily, I don't sweat a lot facially, so it wasn't dropping off, but the problem was getting it off again. They used to have to use this stuff to sort of scrape it off my skin, and on that last shot where we had to do things very quickly, when I was, with my wig and all that sort of stuff, it was more painful taking it off than it was putting it on. And it was fun fur. I mean, it was nylon, so you had the cat suit. You had the hood with the ears.
Yes.
You had the panel around the muzzle.
Yeah.
You had the nose panel. You had the chin. You had the cheeks, the contact lenses, and then they black out your eyes, with mascara. You had the teeth and the contact lenses.
Yeah.
So trying to do a performance through that was
Yes.
a little challenging.
Yeah.
And we had the horse. How could we forget the
Yes,
horse?
the
you know?
horse.
The fastest creature on earth needs a horse. That was another thing, because I'd worked with Alan Waring, the director,
Yeah.
before on Casualty, which
Yes.
is a TV series, a very long-running TV series in the UK, which I did the first 2 series of. Which, funnily enough, he killed me off in that as well. I got stabbed twice by Alan Waring. I try not to take it personally. And I was at a friend's, and I got a phone call. It's way before mobile phones.
Yeah.
And it was my mother saying that my agent had called, and the agent called, and blah, blah, blah. And the first question they asked was, do you wear contact lenses? And I said, well, I don't, but I can learn. I didn't know what it was for. And then the riding didn't really come into it until I spoke to Alan Waring. And I did ride. You know, I'd ridden for quite a while, but I hadn't rode for a while because I'd had quite a bad accident. I'd come off it. I was doing a play down in a place called Salisbury, and I went out riding for the day and came off quite heavily, shall I say. Luckily, I didn't break anything, because obviously I was doing a show at the time. And my confidence had gone somewhat. So when I went to see Alan, and I went to see JNT for the interview, because what had happened is somebody had been cast in the part. You probably don't know who I mean by Pan's People, but they were the dancers. You do.
Yeah, I do.
They were the dancers in Top of the Pops, which was a very famous weekly pop program.
Yeah.
And there was a very beautiful girl called Cherry Gillespie, with long kind of curly hair, and she'd been offered the part, but she didn't ride, and I knew Alan didn't want a stunt double. They wanted the actor who was playing the part to ride. She'd backed out, so this was a really last-minute piece of casting.
Okay.
I then went in, met JNT, met Alan, and they talked about the riding. Are you happy with riding in enclosed situations? I went, yeah, absolutely fine. Anyway, in those days I was still living with my parents, and I told my mother what I'd said, and she said, well, what are you talking about? You had an accident. No, you can't do that. And within the acting fraternity, it's quite well known that there are things you shouldn't lie about, which includes riding, because there was a very famous accident with Roy Kinnear during the Musketeers, you know?
Yes.
And he'd fallen off and subsequently
died.
So, yeah, it was a very sad situation. So she was panicking because she was thinking about that. So I rang the BBC back again, rang Alan, and I said, look, you know, I said I could ride. I can ride, but I had this accident. He said, what are you talking about? I was just about to give you the job.
Yeah.
And then he said, I tell you what, I want you to come tomorrow to the stables where they keep all these incredible screen horses. It was a place called a man called Reg Dent. He was very old at that point. His son was running it, to see whether to assess your riding. And I went up there, and what you've got to realise is these horses are so well trained. I mean, like circus horses, really. They hear turn over and their ears perk up, and they hear cut and they stop. I mean, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
So then, so I went up to this place near north of London. And they said, I'm afraid, this horse, I thought, God. He said, I'm afraid Fury has hurt his hoof. Fury. And then, but Fury had a double, would you believe? It was such a famous horse. They had a double called...
Sorry, they have stunt doubles.
Oh,
The
stunt double.
horses
The
have
horse
stunt
has stunt doubles.
Okay.
This horse had a stunt double called Lucky, which was the most beautiful, easy to ride horse. I mean, you just kind of go, oh, I love riding again. Can I have this horse, please? You know. And the woman at the stable said, there's nothing that we can't cure in a couple of lessons, because they wanted me to do that wild breath, neck reining, where you just do all the commands on the neck of the horse. And then they allowed me to ride Fury. Now, what you've got to understand about Fury is he was an Andalusian stallion who hadn't had it, if you know what I mean. And so he was relatively placid, as you could see in that final shot where the horse suddenly appears. What you have to do with Fury is to gee him up a bit, to cheese him off a bit, because then he flared his nostrils and his neck arched beautifully, and he looked really great. And when he was bored, he just looked like a pony, you know. So I rode him as well, very briefly, because obviously poor old thing had hurt his hoof. You know? Get the doctors out. And they said there's nothing that we can sort this out. And then I went to do some rehearsals because there was all that chase around the playground in episode 1, which was very specific. Anyway, to cut a long story short, got the job, turned up, did the around the rehearsal rooms, and everybody going, "What's she doing?" And then we got on location, and they did actually give me a stunt double, a lovely chap called Damon, who was actually the other cheater who's on the other horse. And Lucky was the other horse, as it turned out. And I think they just thought that I just couldn't do it. And what you don't understand is that Fury hated men. Hated him because he'd been very badly treated in Spain before he brought over. And I remember Steve Dent, who was, because there's the big rear, first of all, in the playground when you first see the horse, and the chase round. And Damon couldn't get Fury to do anything. It was not going to play. And I said to Alan, "Look, I've rehearsed. I know I can do this." And I think he thought he was going to offend Damon, but eventually they got me on the back of the horse, and it was like a pussycat. Everything on. And Steve Dent said, "I hate that bloody horse." I'm sorry. And in fact, the rearing, which I could do anyway, but just in case, because his speciality was rearing. He'd been in a series called Black Beauty. He'd been in The Wicked Lady with Faye Dunaway, So what Steve did, which you can't see in that first scene, is he put a tiny bit of fishing wire on the bridle. So when I went up, he wasn't going to go backwards, but actually it's fairly straightforward to be in a horse when it's rearing. And I was on the horse from there on in, and I really loved it. And I thought, I'm going to go back to riding, but I kept forgetting that I was never going to get horses like that again. So I sadly, I don't think I've ridden since. It's a very expensive hobby as well.
And especially if you've been given like the Rolls Royce of horses.
Well, exactly it. Everything else is a bit of a pony, really.
Yes. But I mean, thinking of survival, there is kind of like very much a subtext or even text of kind of LGBT.
The lesbian thing. It's interesting. I mean, again, we've joked about it over the last couple of days. I had no awareness of it at all. It wasn't discussed. I think Alan was so preoccupied by the technical side of things because there was a lot. And as I said to you earlier on, there was this BBC strike. We had very limited time. We had the rehearsals. We were dealing with stunts with the motorbike and blah, 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 blah. And the contact lenses, of course. And I think, you've got to understand when you go onto a set, everything, the mood of the set is very dictated to by the people who are playing the leads. And Sylve and Soph were such a tight team and such a lovely, lovely team to work with that it was very easy just to play what was in the script. I mean, there were problems because trying to have any sort of emotional contact through 3 inches of funfair is not easy. But I think what was in the script, as I said, can be interpreted any way you like. And I don't think we would have played it differently. And I think you can't play what is effectively a sexual attraction on a kid's show. I mean, that's at that stage, if I'm going to be honest. You can see they have a link. You can see they have a relationship. And there's no question that it's fine and dandy. And that sort of... And also that luring to the wild side, that's more to do with your attitude to life as opposed to being attracted to something. I think that's what essentially Ace was attracted to, that kind of wild freedom that was sort of expressed in that. And again, however you would like to take it, I think you can read into it anything you like.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, like, with all of your directing experience, as to kind of like whether you would have approached it, like if you were doing it now, would you approach it in any different way?
I think there would be, and of course things have come on a lot with makeup. I think there would have been a big discussion about the makeup. And I mean, again, I might have said to you, there are some moments that you can take much closer. When I was on the horse at the very end, when I originally galloped up to the master, I knew I could do it. I galloped right up to him, so the nose of the horse was right there. And Alan just chickened out. He said, and I thought, I wish he'd shot that because it was just so good. And I think that scene between them could have been much more nose to nose. I think that opportunity to look him right in the eye and go, do you bleed? I personally speaking, I would have just made it a bit more, if you mean by But that's you can sit and criticise anybody, but have a variety on any things. But time constraints, you get distracted. It's just one of those things. But I think there's a lot of very good in those three. I mean, we forget at the time we were A, not a cool program to be in, B, put against Coronation Street. But I think it was just finding its feet, and I do think Rona's script was very strong. I mean, if you read the script itself, which sadly probably ended up as telephone paper, I'm sorry to say, as those scripts did, and you think back and you go, oh, I should have kept that, shouldn't I? The description of when you first see the horses and the cheetah was amazing. You see the horse on the horizon rearing up, and in the wind all these bits of things that they're attached are flapping in the wind, and I thought, this is going to look great. So moving on, it was okay. It was okay, but if you looked at those scenes, at the time it was sort of criticised, and to you too. It was sort of it wasn't hugely well received, because I don't think people really quite got it. It was on the back of some quite broad stories, I think. And I love the fact it's been reassessed. So much since then, and people can see so much more in the script, and that's very satisfying.
And also in many ways it kind of foreshadows Rose.
I mean, we were talking about that council house, with Adele, the little girl Squeak, and I think that Russell T. Davies picked up on that really quite a lot in reintroducing that sort of feel. And there's some lovely scenes, with the Kate, who was playing the old friend of Ace's, and shaking her, where's everybody gone? Oh no, what's happened to so and so? I heard he went to Birmingham. I mean, there's some lovely lines in there. It was really good. Benton, she was terrific.
And also just kind of thinking forwards a bit. So when Big Finish was starting up, they did they kind of approach you to be Benny, or how did that come about?
It's a very weird thing. I wasn't hugely aware of the peripheral fan stuff. Obviously, after I'd done Survival, I'd just gone off and do theatre and things like that. And in '85, I'd worked with Mark Strickson in a theatre show in Ibsen, and so I was away. He was always going off and doing, conventions and stuff. And then I think it was '95. I got a call when I was on tour saying, "Will you do a little chat about Survival?" And that was that. And then I was asked to do a video that Keith Barnfather made called "I Was a Doctor Who Monster." And the guy, it was a cracker, wasn't it? The problem is that they weren't allowed to have any clips from the BBC, so you just have old photographs and press cuttings and things like that, And I was interviewed with Sophie. And I remember I was interviewed by a man called Gary Russell. And I remember getting on with him very well. And subsequently, since Survival, I kept in contact with Mike Tucker, who was one of the visual effects designers. And I met him up socially, quite a lot. And he just said to me, we had supper one evening, and he said, I've been asked, would you be interested in playing a character? And then he gave me the full rundown of who Bernice Summerfield was, and the New Adventures, and Gary Russell, and the fact it was... I don't think actually at that point they'd said it had been based on Emma Thompson, but there we go. And poor man's Emma Thompson, cheaper anyway. And so they knew that I'd done a lot of radio. I used to work a lot for BBC Radio 4. I wasn't on the rep, but I did lots of plays there. And I had experience with a company called Independent Radio Drama Productions. So it was a kind of thing that I did. And as I have said about 15 times this weekend, my assumption was that it was a bunch of fanboys in a front room with a Casio recorder, and I thought, well, it's nice to be asked to be done, and I thought, that's very flattering. So, I said, of course. And it went very, very quiet, and I thought, oh, well, maybe it's just not happening, because apparently there'd been some issues with Virgin Publishing, and I don't know whether it was with Paul, but it was about licensing the character. Because as you probably know, and I'm assuming that most people in this room would know, that she was created as the seventh Doctor Companion in the New Adventures, Love and War being the first one in 1992. And then with Virgin losing the license because of the Paul McGann movie, that all went back to the BBC, they just kept Benny Summerfield on. So, I mean, I wasn't aware of any of this at all. And then I got a call saying, do you want to come and audition? I went, audition? Very dare you. No, I know, I'm joking, but I thought, oh, right, okay. And so they sent me I don't know whether they sent it to me or whether I just was given it on the day, the script of Oh No, It Isn't.
Yeah.
I went to Nick Briggs'
Yeah.
flat with microphones strapped to a broom handle,
Yeah.
and Gary Russell and Jason Hay-Gallery and Nick Briggs sitting there going, you know. And it is a very funny script. Again, this is Jack Rayner adapting this slightly insane book about, you know,
Pantomime.
pantomime
Yeah.
and spaceships.
Yes.
God knows what else. But it was very funny. And anyway, I subsequently got the job, and that was very nice. And I turned up at this damp basement in Elephant and Castle,
Yeah.
which is not a very salubrious area of London.
It's improving, but yes.
Not back then.
Not back then.
25
No,
years
no.
ago now, or 26 years
Yeah.
ago now. And, you know, a couple of hippies ran this place, and there was a moth-eaten cat, which I was required to pick up because of Woolsey, you know, Benny's cat. Going, ah. You've probably seen the photograph of me going, because I like cats, but this cat was,
Yeah.
So,
Was it a live cat or a cuddly toy?
it was a real cat.
A real cat.
A
Okay,
real
okay,
cat
yeah,
was
fine,
in
fine.
the studio,
Yeah, okay,
very
fine.
moth-eaten and a bit...
Right, okay.
And, or flea-ridden, shall I say.
Yeah.
And then, I knew nothing of it. I mean, by that way, before that, and again, I've said this already this
Yeah.
weekend, I'd gone to see my friend Steve in a show, Romeo and Juliet on tour, another actor. And I don't know how he'd heard about this, whether it had been announced in DWM or something like or SFX or something. And he said, "Are you playing Bernice Summerfield?" And I'd actually forgotten the character's name. And
Yeah.
I went, yeah, I think I don't know. Yes, possibly. And
Yeah.
then he just said, "You've got to play her. She's an icon."
Yes.
And he'd read all the books. He was an Oxford graduate, or
Okay,
Cambridge,
yeah.
or whichever
Yeah.
one. And I was slightly surprised. And so I knew, obviously, by that point, that she had a following.
Yeah.
I get asked quite a lot whether I'd read any of the books.
Yeah.
And I must confess I hadn't. And I thought, because as an actor, you are presented a script,
Yeah.
and you have to make a decision
Yeah.
about the kind of person that comes off the page.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I knew exactly who that person was. And I think
Yeah.
that's the strength of the
Yeah.
character that Paul Cornell has actually created, and the writers who have written for her
Yeah.
subsequently, obviously. And she felt very fresh, and I kind of understood her, weirdly, although I'm not an all-drinking or partying, should we say, lady at that point. So this mad script turned out. And then Nick Courtney walked through the door, and I went, oh, because, you know, I watched Doctor Who. You know, my brother had been briefly in Talons of Weng Chiang, and I watched it. And I mean, I even just about remember Hartnell.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting day because there was literally one microphone in the middle of this room and Alistair Locke in a corner with a DAT machine. And I'd only ever done very old-fashioned, you know, radio drama with a spot effects lady, a Foley lady, and one microphone, and all very formal. I thought, this is just... And of course, that is then produced in situ, you know, all the sound effects are there in situ. I just thought, this is going to sound rubbish. They had a lot of Nick Briggs friends in, an old chap who he'd been directed by, and a lovely Jo Castleton, because I take spotlight photographs when I'm not working, and which is the actor's directory, and she was a girl I knew, and somebody I didn't know called Mark Gatiss.
Yeah, well,
they're all just, I know, he ruined his career, didn't he? And we recorded it, and then suddenly they said, "Oh, now we want you to do an interview with this magazine here, and then we'd like you to launch you at this convention here." And I'm thinking, I haven't even told my agent about this, because I really thought it was just, I mean, I don't use this in such a pejorative way, but an amateur production. I mean, that's basically what I thought it was. Anyway, the months went by. I think by that point we changed studios, and they adapted some of the New Adventures books, and there was Beyond the Sun, which was the second one, and then we did this Time Ring trilogy, which was Birthright, and one with
Walking to Babylon.
Walking to Babylon with Liz Sladen, and the
Just
amazing
War.
Just War, Lance Parkin's novel, and then we just waited for something to come out. I mean, the slightly amusing thing in those days, you know, we started with tapes. They did tapes and CDs. They were so technologically advanced. And I got the tape and I put it into the machine. I thought, well, this is going to sound interesting. And I suddenly got this, and 3 little piggies walked up the road. And I thought, I don't remember this. And the company had got the wrong tape of the wrong thing. It was a kid's thing. And I went... what on earth is this about? And they apologized, sent me the right thing.
Yeah.
And then I heard it, and it blew my socks off, because
Yeah.
even back then, I mean, digital technology was very in its infancy back then. And I think we have to thank Alistair Locke a lot for the success of those episodes, because he did the music as well as the effects.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that the BBC heard, that in order that Big Finish eventually got the license for Doctor Who. And I thought they were extraordinary. At that point in 99, when they did get the license, I thought that was thank you and good night, Bernice.
Yeah.
You have done your job, now go.
Yes.
But Gary was championed the character, and here we are, 25 years later.
Yeah, because I mean, Gary was the reviewer in Doctor Who magazine during sort of Benny's sort of early days in the books.
Right. Yeah.
And he very much kind of like fell in love with the character. You could tell that as reading the columns. He didn't like Transit, which is Benny's second book, but that's because she spends most of the time kind of with her mind wiped.
Oh, one of those old
Yes,
tricks.
one of those old
there's
tricks.
a lot of that. It's either that or alternative universes. Isn't it?
Yes. So I'm just thinking, if anybody has any questions, feel free to kind of come up to. There's a mic
just in the middle of the room here.
Yes, just next to where you are.
You're going to have to jump up and down
Yes.
for that one. Oh, well done.
Okay.
She's such a pro. Look at that.
Right.
What is a question you don't get asked much, or what is a fun fact about yourself?
Oh my God. What I don't get asked much about. I tell you what, the one thing I did do for Doctor Who was a voice for the animation Dreamland.
Oh.
Have you watched Dreamland? And I don't get asked about Dreamland very much. And I played a Martian who ends up hiding in a box with David Tennant. A terrible idea. That was extraordinary, because it was an amazing cast. It really was. And I was very worried, because I was playing opposite an actor I know called Nick Rose, quite well known, and we sounded quite posh. I said, we're playing Martians. Are we sure about this? And nobody told us whether they were doing anything to our voices.
Yes,
you know.
yeah.
So subsequently, we'd seen the storyboards, and we thought, wow, this is going to look great. But if I'm honest, I think the animation didn't quite come together, shall we say?
Yeah.
David, my late partner, he said, I'm here and I'm playing a cockroach. And his voice was so treated. Fun fact. Well, no, it isn't a fun fact, but it's very interesting when I go for castings for things in the UK, because really, Benny, although I've been doing it a very long time, is very niche. It's very tiny, and a lot of casting directors really don't know stuff about it. So they tend to say, right, tell us something interesting about yourself. And I go, I'm the longest-running Doctor Who companion you've never heard of. And they kind of scratch their head, and it's very difficult to describe this weird hinterland I'm in, because I'm official and unofficial, and am I canon, aren't I canon, and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite nice to be able to pull that out of the bag every so often. But thank you for your question. I appreciate that.
So,
Hello, Matt.
hello, Matt.
Question about the directing and producing process at Big Finish. Can you maybe walk us through what that is like, and how much input you get into either the writing, casting, or how much of that comes kind of pre-formed, and like what areas do you kind of get to?
Well, I don't produce. The producers are the ones that get the writers together, decide who wants to direct, who's going to write the series, and outlines the storyline of whatever series it is. My very first directing was with Nigel Fairs, actually, on the Tomorrow People series. As a director, I hope that I am the kind of director that I would, as an actor, like to work with. And I'm lucky enough, and I think all of us directors are lucky enough to be able to we do our own casting. We don't have a casting director. I think Barney got credited as once, but we'd never had a casting director in that sense. And because I've been around a long time, I'm a bit like a kid in a sweet shop. So, you get the script and you go, I know who's going to play this. But of course, you do inherit. If you're doing Companion Chronicles, you're doing Blake 7, you inherit original casts. And some are better than others. Some are obviously of an age compared to what they do, but always, always, always surround your regulars with the best cast you can, because then actually if you cast good actors, everybody comes up, you know. In terms of the script, I trust the producer to give me a script that has gone through an editing process. Occasionally, you know, I'll get not an early draft, but a kind of just before the last draft or a last draft. It doesn't happen very often, but on the day, I've obviously, what I tend to do is read the script once, and you read it as you would if you're reading if there are little plots, you kind of go, oh, I didn't get that bit. Or, you know, I do a lot of period stuff, and occasionally I hate anachronisms. I just, you know, I try and like to make it authentic as possible. And I might literally say, I think the syntax should be changed a little there, especially if some of the writers haven't read it out loud to themselves. You find people have very long sentences. So you say, you know, put a comma in there, put a semicolon in there, put an ellipsis in, you know, just to get the rhythm of the speech, you know. So what I do then, I've read the script, I then have a big book that I put all the character names in, and I write a list of the actors that I'd like. I like to try new actors a lot, and we have this director, as I said, called Spotlight, and some people have their voice reels on. The thing is, you can't rely on somebody looking like the character that you have, but occasionally you want somebody within an age range, maybe a different cultural background, that sort of thing. So you can put that there are search engines that you can use in Spotlight. I'll also use actors. I mean, there's a running joke that I know everybody, but it's only because I've been around a long time. So, you know, I've got a good Rolodex, as they say, of actors that I know. And I do actually have a little black book of people. And it's not necessarily people I know. I might see something on television, or I might hear something and I go, who's that? Problem is with television, they're very bad at credits these days. Everything whizzes up, or, you know, and you're forever either going on IMDb or, you know, and iPlayer website drives me nuts, because you have to, they bury that cast list, you know, trying to find out very quickly. But anyway, then it is the director's responsibility to ring the agents and book the actors, in which case you sometimes you know the actors, or you know somebody who knows the actors, and you
like get a reference, or
well, no, you make a direct contact, which agents hate. But what you do is you say, I am, you know, you ask somebody, you say, can you just say who I am, and then I'm going to contact them through Facebook is terribly helpful, and Twitter and things like that sometimes, just to be able to make a direct contact with somebody you don't necessarily know. Just to say, can you warn them that I will be contacting them? And this is more to do, it's a bit sad, more to do with the fact that we're not huge payers, you know. So you say, look, this is what I do, this is what it is. Don't laugh when I tell you how much we pay, but if you are up for it, I will then contact your agent. And then there's no excuse for them to say, you've got to pay them £3,000. You go, nope. So it's very, you know, there's a process of negotiation to be had. Sometimes the actors you want aren't available. Sometimes they drop out with a day to go, you know, that sort of thing. So in effect, you then send all the details to the producer and the people who, sometimes people work off scripts, hard copy scripts sometimes. They work off iPads, so you organise all that. By that point, the producer has already booked the studio. We now use a place called the Sandhouse, which is actually opposite the old Acton Hilton, which no longer exists. They knocked it down, made it into student accommodation, and called it the rehearsal rooms. You go, oh, very funny. Classic BBC-owned goal, if you ask me. But there we go. We don't even have rehearsals now. That's what's so sad. You know, it's really, the actors are just flung in front of a camera these days. So anyway, to cut a long story short, most 70-minute dramas just take one day to produce. A lot of people get very surprised that we work so quickly because it's digital recording. You know, you don't have to choreograph everything, because everything is on mic, even people screaming blue murder. My job really is to be your ears and to sit there and actually listen. And you've got to nuance a drama. You hope that there's the nice chase scenes paid off with some slightly more considered moments, and it's like oral choreography, if you see what I mean. Of course, you also have to keep in mind that the script is designed for audio. So if it says a boulder runs towards them, they've got to talk like that. You can't get them to talk the same way, which is what I was touching on at the earlier panel about having that physical energy to keep that performance up, because people, they look at the microphone and they go that kind of throwaway performance, and it simply doesn't work. You have to give permission for people to be almost over the top, actually. But also it lends itself to very intimate moments as well. So they are all with a music stand with a microphone like that, with kind of pop shield, thing in front of it. If there's a monster voice, we put them in what's called a dead room, which is where it's completely sealed. When we used to be in Moat, which you might have heard about with the splendid lunches and everybody in separate booths, that was great because everybody was on a separate track, and you could do crossovers. So if you're having an argument, you could do it real time. The Soundhouse, you can't really. I mean, I was taught in a radio at drama school that you had, even if you were interrupting somebody, you had to leave a beat between each scene so you could edit it later on. So we spend a day recording, 2 days on the longer ones. It then goes off to the sound designer. I, as a director, like to come on board at the effects edit because the effects and the dialogue are so interlinked with each other, timing-wise, that it's not useful just to have a straight dialogue edit from my point of view. It depends. We have so many editors. There are some that get it like that. There are some people who haven't been doing it too long who may have experience in different genre or something, and it can be a long process. I had one very difficult edit years ago. I won't go into it, but we were understanding this guy was really experienced, and there was some really, really, really basic errors, like somebody going, looking into what is it? They say, they've looked into a room, but then they opened the door. It's that's bad. Now, I mean, that's an extreme example. I really like silences, the effects to if somebody's walking along a train track at night, I just want to hear some gravel. I don't want music. I just want to set that scene, because once you're in that world, you can, with stereo recording, with digital, it's amazing what you can create. My one sorrow, does anybody know what binaural recordings are? You know what I mean by binaural? It's where, years ago, they started recording, they had this sort of skull with the microphones in the ears. So when you listen to it on earphones, you are effectively, it's resonating around your own head as if you are in the scene. And the one thing I always wanted to do as a ghost story would be finished by binaural, but in those days the equipment was very expensive. You have to rehearse it, and it never happened. But there are still ways of surrounding yourself with these atmospheres. So anyway, you get the edit back. You make a lot of notes saying, put a beat in there. If a moment needs to read a bit longer, I might say put a pause between that phrase and that phrase. When I'm actually recording on the day, I will only really ever take 2 takes and what are called pickups. I think it's the law of diminishing returns after a second take, because the energy levels tend to go a bit, And sometimes first takes are fantastic. They're really lively and people pick it up. And most good actors are pretty instinctive. They hear what's going on and they listen to each other and they just react. And if the script's good enough, then it's really exciting. And but occasionally I'll say to the editor, can you use the first take of that phrase and then the second take for the rest of that, and then that pickup. So he'll make notes, which then they go to the editor. I will listen to that FX edit. I might say, shut up there, take the level back there. I mean, it's just tweaking, Then it goes back again. I'll have the second edit, and I'll sign off all the things the notes, and then it gets sent for the music edit. And sometimes we have the same editor as composer, and sometimes it goes off to a different composer. And again, I'm very occasionally will say, this is the kind of feel I want for this. I'd love it if you had a glass harmonica at this point, or I'd love it if you had but most of them pick up what it's about. What I can't bear is just too much music. I'll probably hear me bitching about that earlier, unsurprisingly. And then eventually, once it's all signed off, it goes off for mastering. And Bob is your uncle. Also on the day, because I'm a photographer, I take the photographs for the inside, and sometimes for the cover as well. So. And that's it. Sorry, that was really long-winded, but that's what
very
most of us
interesting.
do.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But,
Yes, there's a
so
question.
we've got a question.
Yeah,
over
hello.
there. Yeah.
Yes, we have a virtual question.
Oh, yes.
Oh, cool.
Back
Hi.
there.
I'm told this question ties in well to the previous question.
Okay.
Good.
What can be some challenges of being a director, and how do you overcome them?
It doesn't happen very often. The one thing I give myself a tiny credit for, and I think it's because I've been at it so long, is that I think I can tell when somebody can act and when somebody can't. You can tell within 2 seconds when you're listening to somebody's voice reel whether they can do it or not. It's just an instinct, go, oh, they understand. They make sense of what's on the page. Very occasionally, it doesn't quite work out and you have to give more notes on the day. I'm very cautious about that because it makes people feel very,
If
self-conscious.
they're doing something wrong or...
Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is, you must never ever say something is wrong because actually it's a choice, But I've never really come across somebody who was terrible. But I did have problems. Every time I see the word a child of 9 in the character list, I go, because I got my fingers burnt quite heavily on the very first Lost story, which was, as you know, it was quite Mission to Magnus. I say no more. And it was quite a challenge, and that I had 2 kids who I hadn't auditioned, but I knew their agent, and they specialised in kids for audios, and it was clear from day one they didn't have a clue and couldn't read properly and didn't know the words, and I was trying to make it a game, and it was such hard work, and that was a challenge. I think sometimes when and it doesn't happen very often, when sound editors don't quite get it, and you've given the third note about, no, I really need 3 seconds silence at this point, and it still comes back and it hasn't been done. I find it frustrating, but it's the overall scheme of things in life, it's a small challenge. It's not too bad, but overall, it's very satisfying. I love it when a plan comes together. And James, who I work with a lot on the Torchwood ones, I will experiment with actors I've never heard of, and not names. Occasionally they'll say, "Why? How did I get here?" And I go, "Well, I found you on Spotlight." Yeah. A lot of actors think Spotlight doesn't work, but it really does. And within the first phrase, we both know what we want for the part, and then somebody just delivers the goods. We turn to each other and go, "Yes," and we just sit back and enjoy it. Thanks for the question, by the way. Hello.
Hello. Me personally, I've only listened to a handful of Doctor Who audios. I'm not sure I've actually heard any of the Bernice Summerfield ones. Is there one that you would particularly choose that you would be a good gateway
25 years of it. In terms of her very, very first appearance, the adaptation of Love and War was the sort of, it's an adaptation of the novel where she first appeared. I would always say start at the beginning, but my thinking is, listen to the first series if you want to, those single ones, which you can possibly leave out. Oh God!
I was thinking.
Which one was it? That was the one with Richard Franklin. It did not come together. We had some terrible technical issues on it.
Dragon's Wrath.
That's it. Dragon's Wrath. Forget Dragons. I didn't say that. But actually, those box sets, The New Adventures of there are lots and lots of wonderful things. And, there is a big storyline, story arcs, regular characters, Braxia Tell, you name it, they're all in there. But you can start with the Sylvester and Sophie, the ones the New Adventures. For obvious reasons, my absolute favourite are the box sets with David Warner and Mark Gatiss. They are... James produced some wonderful stories. They are really, really high-class stories. They're not classic Doctor Who's. They've got a lot of layers. They call her a fun character. She uses her humour in tight situations. And I mean, the one thing that I find with Benny, sometimes in the early days, people overwrote for her, and she would banter the whole time, and you just go, oh God, she gets so irritating. And she's the kind of character that you want to spend time with, you know. They talk that, you know what I mean by the Bechdel test. There's this thing about you know, female characters being defined through men, and she ticks every box in that she defines her own universe. She doesn't refer to that. But the relationship she has, actually with every doctor she appears with, is very, she's not competing with the doctor, you'll find. She's not somebody out-doctoring the doctor, but she understands his darkness, and I think she knows how to deal with it. And she is her own person. She isn't, the thing I like about Benny is that she's not a totem. She's not kind of, I'm a feminist, and she's not a kind of, she's just completely fallible. She gets it wrong as well as gets it right. She's very funny. She likes a drink. She likes, you know, a few relationships. I mean, she progresses over the years. She has a you know, child and all this sort of thing. Don't even ask me the backstory on that one. I mean, that's just, yeah. We'll leave that for you the next convention I see you, okay? Yeah. I think what you'll get from those box sets is her relationship and the way she operates, and the fact that the character still exists after 27. Yeah, it's more than 27 years. 27, 28, 28, 29 years. You know, there is a reason for it. You know, regardless of me playing it, there is a reason why this character still exists. Even though she wasn't referred to during the 60th. Anyway, that's another story. Can I? Your question. Thank you.
Yes, I have a kind of a follow-up question for that. I've noticed that sometimes it seems that a writer may struggle to write for a strong female lead. Sometimes it seems like maybe it might be a male author who doesn't understand female thinking, or a female author who's not willing to push as hard. What do you feel in the writing context helps to bring out the best in a female lead?
I think I'm not an exceptionalist when it comes to that. I think you're either a good writer or a bad writer, to be honest. I think it's unhelpful to be that specific. I think it depends on the strength of the character in the first place. Now, you've got to remember it's a male. Paul Cornell is a man who created Bernice Summerfield. However, Jack Rayner adapts the stories, and I don't know whether you read. Actually, it's out of print now. The Squire's Crystal and The Glass Prison are two of I did the audio books for them. If you can't get them in print, two of the best stories I've. I mean, Jack Rayner's writing is staggeringly good, but equally, I've had female writers who didn't get it. I mean, it's just somebody who gets the story. My problem with a couple of the male writers is that they were too much in love with Benny, and I think then she becomes too much of a sort of sexy Lara Croft, and I can't be doing that, because I do think she just lives in her own world. She gets on with life, and life happens to her. I don't think she represents womanhood. I think she represents a very human person. And I think that is her attraction. And I think the writers who are good, I mean, Simon Guerrier, those guys, a great writer, absolutely gets Benny. I don't think there's anything particularly special, because there's so much backstory for her anyway that they've got a lot of, there's a directory that thick on her past life. I remember the only thing I've really ever asked to be changed, there was, oh God, it's going to be a spoiler. There's a point that happens, and block your ears, that happens to her ex-husband, Jason. And very soon after this thing happens with her ex-husband, Jason, in one of the stories, a new producer, and the story was she had an affair with somebody else, and there was this bantery thing in a lift, and I went, can I just say, block your ears, if your husband's just been murdered, that is not going to be happening. That there is an emotional context in which any person would not be doing that. And so I'm afraid I knocked that on their head. But generally speaking, I'll just go, yeah, I'll go along with that. She's her own protagonist. She never plays second fiddle, even though she's put with the doctor. That's why, weirdly, with all the doctors that I've worked with, I've worked with 7, 8, and now
9.
9. And I won't even count the Capaldi one because I read the audiobook of the Big Bang Generation, which you know about. But I genuinely think that the character works with every Doctor in that kind of wonderful relationship that they've built up. But going back to the ones you should listen to, those New Adventures of Benny box sets are definitely worth having a look at. Mm-hmm. Hello, Seth.
Hello, it's like you read my mind, because Big Finish puts out a tremendous amount of output, and I had lost track of how many doctors Benny had worked with.
Oh, right, yeah.
So you just answered one of my questions.
Okay.
But I know, next month is when Benny teams up with the 9th Doctor.
Yeah.
And with you working for Big Finish so often, and working with a lot of the talent, I was wondering, is there a classic Doctor or any Doctor in particular that you would enjoy seeing Benny team up with in an adventure? Or do you have any anecdotes about funny working with any of the other Doctors?
Well, I mean, the thing is that people talk about this being a family, and it really is. I mean, there's nobody you don't get on with, because we all meet each other at places like this. You know, we all socialise, we all have a great time. When Benny was first put together with Sylvester and Sophie in Shadow of the Scourge, which Paul Cornell wrote, I was very aware that they have a very tight dynamic and they are a team. And I felt a bit like an interloper in that situation. And because Paul had written it, Benny was written up really quite majorly. And I didn't know whether I felt comfortable, but actually it then became obvious that Benny worked, theatrically speaking, with the Doctor. And everybody's, nobody's really looked at me and kind of said, who are you? Because I work with that companion and that's my television companion. I think most actors just go along with it and say the lines, really, to be honest. But I mean, as an actor, again, it's very difficult to describe to people in my own industry, especially when it comes to getting other jobs, quite how many people you work with in Big Finish. I mean, obviously, I met David at Big Finish. That's how we met. And if you told me 10 years previously that would happen, it's like, what? Yeah. You work with the best actors in the country. I've worked with one of my favourite actresses of all time is Sian Phillips, and the fact that I ended up directing her and working with her, I mean, you just don't get those opportunities, and Derek Jacobi and all of those guys, and actually almost because the word got round fairly quickly that they were great to work with, even if you weren't going to make a fortune. Most actors just want to have a good time and work with good people, and once that confidence is spread, I mean, word gets around. And it's a dreadful thing to say, I get a lot of begging emails, going, give me a job, and. It's nice to be able to give people an opportunity. It's just nice to be able to give people work, because you know what it's like. It's not a great industry for that, So I've been very lucky in all that time, not just to direct, but to work with some great actors. Really lucky. Oh yeah.
Kind of follow up from that question and moving on from the audibles, talking about New Who and the new reboot. Do you have a favorite Doctor or a favorite story arc?
I mean, obviously, I watch it because it would be silly not to, really. I remember when Matt Smith was announced, and I took Matt Smith's photographs because his first agent, his agent was Wendy Padbury, and she found him at the National Youth Theatre. And I take spotlight photographs. I used to take the agency she worked with, a lot of their photos. And this very callow, unconfident boy turned up. And Wendy just said, this boy's a bit of a genius. She'd seen him at the National Youth Theatre. And he was very young. And he was full of, I don't know, I haven't been to drama school and I can't, and I remember saying to him, don't think about it. If people think you are good enough to employ, do not spare a moment to think about it. And I remember Wendy telling me, she'd put him up for a play at quite a well-known theatre in London called the Royal Court. And they'd already said, no, we'd seen everybody. And they went, no, see this boy. And he went along for this audition, and within 10 minutes, the casting director had got back to Wendy and said, "Where did you find him?" You know? So I knew of his reputation, and they had this big announcement on the 9 o'clock news in those days about, you know, that they'd started making a big thing about the new casting of the Doctor. And there'd been lots of rumours and speculation about who was going to be playing it, and they put up 3 pictures on the news because the announcement was going to be made afterwards, and I think it was like Patterson Joseph and all the usual suspects, and then Matt Smith. And I knew who Matt Smith was, but nobody else did, and I thought, Stephen Moffat, you clever bugger. You are brilliant. And I knew he would have got it, because there's no way that somebody relatively obscure at that time, you'd only really done theatre, would have done it. And I remember David saying to me, saying, "Oh, I don't know about how he looks." And I went, "Oh, no. I said, you just wait." Yeah. And of course he was announced. And then David ended up doing Cold War with him. And he agreed with me. I said, what he's going to be is a young head on old shoulders? No, an old head on young shoulders. Because he had this extraordinary quality of otherness. And if there's one opinion I have about Doctor Who, is that the Doctor has to have an otherness. And it's interesting hearing Sylvester talking about the sadness of this old character. And I think however young you cast, you have to remember that. You have to remember that inner melancholy and alien. He's an alien. And that's what I think Matthew... The best Doctors for me sum up. So my favourites actually are Matthew and Peter Capaldi. I think of this. It's a personal thing. I know that you're attracting a younger audience. It's a dreadful thing to say. I have a problem with pretty doctors. I don't think the Doctor should be that pretty. And I really loved those. I can't specifically remember storylines, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. Other than when River Song turned up, and I'm not saying anything. She got a diary? What do you mean she got a diary? She knows the Doctor. She's archaeologist. Where's this going? Sorry.
Though you have worked with River since, haven't you?
Well, you say that. I've actually never met her. But we did. We recorded separately. Yeah. But actually, again, the dynamic works very well. And I've just worked with Bonnie as well on Sylvester's last one. So that was interesting. And Bonnie's great. I love Bonnie. She's a lovely girl.
I mean, what you were saying about Matt reminds me. So a friend of mine went to school with Matt.
Oh, wow. Because he was a footballer. He was a great footballer.
He was a decent footballer, and he remembers kind of like he was like a year or two younger than Matt, and he just remembers Matt being this kind of like having this like extraordinary leadership and energy and everything. And also, he was the first. Matt was the first person he ever heard swear in real life.
Random.
Yes. Yeah.
But he has. I won't say it's the same. He has a distinctive and charismatic quality, which weirdly I sort of recognised in my David Warner. There's an intangible something they've just got, and you can't train for that.
No.
You can't develop it. It just is. Some actors that you just can't take your eyes off, and you don't know why, and they don't know why most of the time.
Yeah.
It's just something, and I think Matt had that.
I mean, we're coming close to time, but I was just wondering, is there anything that, because like obviously Benny's direction has changed so much over the years, so are there any sort of ways that she's gone that has kind of like really surprised you, or?
Well, it was a surprise that they had a section which I think they've acknowledged is probably not a great idea, where they filled a lot of the plot in with books. And then I came back to the audios after a little break, and they'd been publishing these books. And I went, at what point did this woman become pregnant? And they said, well, she's not really pregnant. I said, what do you mean she's not really? Well, it's dog. And what? It's half dog. And what? And I was like, okay. I mean, obviously, I've subsequently read the book where they all completely make sense, and it sounds really dodgy, but that was a surprise, I have to say. It's not dog, it's Kaloran, get it right. Okay. But I think all of the producers I've worked with over the years have been brilliant in progressing her character. She's never stayed the same. You obviously you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
But she has had a proper, I hate the word, but a proper journey. And she continues to have that proper journey. And she hasn't changed beyond all recognition, but she's still essentially that character that you want to hang with, I hope, anyway.
Yeah. But also, she's not frozen in aspect.
No, exactly.
Yes,
And you can't do that. You can't do that for 25 years.
No.
I mean, it would be ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, what's so lovely is that there are new listeners all the time, and you get young girls as well really loving the character, and I love that. I absolutely love it.
And also, I suspect you might be discovering, or you might have new audiences discovering you through things like Spotify, because I know Big Finish.
That's right. They've got a few things. If people, I've not heard it before. I mean, the really weird thing is when they cast Jodie, I was rung up by the BBC to be interviewed at crack of dawn on breakfast television. I mean, I'd never been approached to have an opinion about Doctor Who on television. And I think, to be honest, if I'm cynical, they were scrabbling around for any woman who had a Doctor Who connection. Went, no, we'll have her on at 10 to 7 in the morning, And I mean, they shoved me in this cupboard because I refused. It was a Sunday afternoon. I refused to get on a train up to Salford to go and be on the sofa, And they put me in a cupboard in a television centre at 6 o'clock in the morning with no makeup and whatever it is. And then suddenly, I'm on and I can't see anything and I'm on a stool in a cupboard and, I'm kind of going, and Louise Lynch and the broadcaster went, you look delighted. I can see you're so happy that it's, Jodie. I'm going, yes. And I was basically saying, at that time that every doctor reflects the spirit of their own age. And I think, in whatever you think about Jodie, ultimately, every doctor has hit their zeitgeist. And I think every doctor has their time. And I think Ncuti has his time. And I think it's very exciting.
Yes. Speaking of time, alas, we have run out of time, I'm afraid. So I'd like you all to join me in thanking Lisa.
Well, thank you.
So when can people next see you?
I'm going to be today. I'm signing autographs again. I think 6:30, maybe earlier. Anyway, it's in your schedules.
Yes.
And it'd be lovely to meet you. And if anybody wants to keep talking Benny, I'm here.
Fantastic.
Thanks very much.
Brilliant.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.